My name is Josh Sanchez. I'm 23 years old, and I gave my life to Jesus when I was 15. I didn't grow up in church. I wasn't a church kid. I grew up Catholic. I was baptized as a baby, but didn't really follow any of that stuff. Um, so I lived most of my life having a knowledge of Jesus Christ, but never really living for Him, never really knowing who He was. And it wasn't until, we decided to leave California because it was just a bad scene over there. My dad was involved in drugs and gangs and, all that stuff that involves that. So we left that place. We came to Texas. My aunt and uncle were stationed here in Fort Hood. And even through that, even though we made a drastic lifestyle change, we still had issues. My family had issues. So from a very early age, I dealt with depression, I dealt with suicidal thoughts, and just kind of wondering, what my purpose was in life, and just like any young boy, as soon as you start going through your adolescent years, you try to figure out who you are, so you start getting involved in different things and making different friends. And so I had a pretty normal childhood in the sense that, it was normal to see things and have things spoken to you, because of people's addictions with alcohol or drugs. And so leaving the house was my way of escaping the real world. So when I was at school, I didn't go there to learn. I just went over there to be with my friends, just, get away from that. But when I would go home, it was like a prison because, my dad was an alcoholic. My mom, she was very strict, very kind of abusive, at times. But, even in that, you make the best of it. But as the years go on, I just swept things under the rug. And, I came to a critical point in my life when I was about 15 years old where I was cracking, I was just losing it. I was losing my mind, it seemed. And my mom, around that same time, I got a job at a daycare. And the ladies at that daycare would always invite her to church, would always tell her about Jesus. And she went to church one day and she started going over the process of time. And before you knew it, man, she got saved. And she started reading the Bible in front of us, making us read the Bible, and we hated it, We didn't want to do that religious stuff. We didn't grow up that way, so why would we do it, But then, and then she started taking me to church. She took my brother to church, took my sister. And I was the hard-headed out of all my mom's kids, out of all my brothers and sisters, I was very, I fought her kicking and screaming, man. I mean, I made us late to church. I dressed bad on purpose. I just had no reverence for God or church or anything like that. I just thought it was a place of hypocrites. I just thought it was a place where you just waste your time, But it was probably about a year had passed of my mom just taking me to church to where one day I was falling asleep in church, and I don't know what it was, but it's like I found myself, like I was falling asleep, and then I found myself listening to the preacher, and I found myself so focused that I shocked myself. I was like, oh my God, like I'm really listening to this guy. But there was something about what he was preaching, or something about he was saying that just caught my attention. And it's like every word that was coming out of his mouth was just, just God speaking to me. That I was a sinner, that I was lost, and that I needed Him, and that I needed to call out to His Son Jesus, and that I was on my way to hell. And I remember that was the beginning of God really getting a hold of my heart. And over a process of time, man, I just remember coming to a place where I was like, God, if there's nothing else in my life that makes sense anymore. Because having a bunch of friends, relationships didn't make sense no more. It left me empty, it left me having trust issues. Chasing the things I thought would make me happy just left me more empty, a bigger void in my heart. And then I remember just crying out to God. I was by myself, and I said, God, you know what? When I go to church this Sunday, I'm gonna give my life to you. And I remember I went to church that Sunday. It was in December 2011, and the sermon was just basically on what Jesus did on the cross. And I remember just hearing that sermon, and it was exactly what I needed to hear. And I remember at the altar call, Pastor Oscar Gafour said, if you deny Christ before man, he'll deny you before the Father. And I remember that cut me to my heart. And I said, God, I don't want you to deny me because I've been denying you this whole time. And I remember just lifting up my hand as quickly as he said that statement. I went to that altar and I prayed, and that was just the beginning. And before you knew it, I got invited to go to morning prayer and had no idea what morning prayer was, but we went to morning prayer, and just something changed in that morning prayer meeting inside my heart where it's almost like my salvation was sealed. And next thing you know, I started carrying my Bible in school. I started telling people about Jesus. I stopped doing the stuff that I used to do. I stopped listening to certain things, stopped watching certain things. And I just began to fall in love with Jesus because now I had a purpose, and now I knew that, I'm not gonna waste my life. I'm gonna live for God. And I lived for Jesus. I got baptized in this church. I got filled with the Holy Ghost in this church, with evidence of speaking in tongues. And just God, a purpose, a plan, and a destiny just began to be unfolded before my eyes. And before I knew it, man, I was just in a place where I never thought I'd see myself, alive. By the time I was 18, now I'm 23, and I'm married. And I never thought I'd get married, and that's just the amazing grace of God right there. And one thing I tell people, man, is that I don't deserve what I have, and none of us don't, but that's what God gives us, is his son, Jesus Christ. And that's the greatest thing that's ever happened in my life, is just becoming a born-again Christian and living for Jesus.